Doesn't matter how many times you boil it or distill it or filter it or anything like that. It will always do that.
Yeah. I feel like by the end of today's session, I'm going to have such an appreciation for bartenders.
I hope so.
10. Yes. Okay, cool. I think we can go ahead and get started.
Cool.
Thanks for joining. My name is Vasiliki. I'm the founder of Kimatan, a local effort here celebrating small businesses with the community. Today, in advance of a night in to celebrate, we thought to bring a cocktail hour, and we're so excited that we partnered with Holden Hagerman to do so. Holden Hagerman is a service industry local with nearly 8 years in the industry. You may have seen him around town in the past few years at Lago Tacos Lyn-Lake or Borough and Parlour. He has a passion for anything you could get nerdy about, cocktails included. Be sure to pick his brain while he walks you through making one of the most classic cocktails out there. So I'm really excited to pass it on over and to let you get to teaching us about cocktails. Thanks for joining us.
So, yeah, I'm Holden. I have been bartending for a little bit. It wasn't all bartending that I did in the service industry, but you know, I've been around as a server, as everything in a restaurant, and then bartending kind of was where I wanted to head with it over time. So yeah, I want to, you know, give people an opportunity to kind of walk through how to make a couple of drinks, one very, very classic and one of my own that I created. So the first cocktail that I chose for this is an old fashioned, and I picked the most classic cocktail, and I say that because that is the name of the old fashioned. It's called an old fashioned because it is, in fact, the original cocktail. It's really kind of the first cocktail that was around that was like a single serving drink that was more than just spirit. And so, you know, when bartending started becoming a thing and people started making cocktails in the 1800s, primarily in America, they were making a lot of punches where it was just like a lot of juice and maybe tea and hot water and other herbs and things like that with spirits. And that was kind of some of the first iterations of cocktails, as well as an old fashioned, which is very straightforward. Most people assume it's a bourbon drink only, right? But it's not. An old fashioned is quite simply spirit, first and foremost. Of course, we need the alcohol. Bitters, right? And that bitters kind of function as like spices to your cocktail, right? You only need a tiny little touch of this thing, and it's super potent and flavorful, and will, you know, change the flavors of the drink that you're having from the bottom to the top. And then you need sugar, something to sweeten the spirit and the bitters. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be sugar. You just need a fat of some kind. And then water. Water is always going to be the most important ingredient to any cocktail. There's really no cocktail that doesn't need it to come alive. So it is a very key component. But when you just take those four things, bitters, spirit, fat, and water, then you can kind of start to see how this was the original cocktail, because originally things like Angostura bitters, stuff like that, were drams for your ailment. It was a bunch of botanicals in alcohol, and people were like, drink this and it will make your stomach feel better, or something else that would help cure your ailments. And so they've been around. But regardless, why don't we go ahead and start with that? So I like to use my tools because I have them. And if you ever want to like really start making cocktails for yourself, for others, and if you see that being a regular thing, it's always worth investing in the right tools. So you're going to be using a mixing glass. The stuff in this cocktail is only spirit, sugar, bitters. It's all alcohol or sugar or water, really. There's no citrus involved, so we won't need a shaker for this one. I'll explain why when we make our second drink. So then you can pull out your ingredients. You want to make sure that you have everything ready to go. I have a simple syrup here. I made mine with raw cane sugar, which I personally like more than just a granulated sugar, right? And when you're making a simple syrup, it's pretty straightforward. You can make a 1-to-1 ratio simple syrup by weight, where you weigh out your sugar and then you weigh out your water. Really easy to weigh water. 1 milliliter is 1 gram. Boom, boom. Love the metric system. I make a rich simple syrup most of the time, just because I want to have more sugar in it, but not as much volume. So you can do a 2-to-1 by weight on that, but it really depends on the ingredients that you're using. Some simple syrups are better 1-to-1, some 2-to-1. It just takes some experience and testing things out. So we are going to make a bourbon old fashioned today, which is the classic old fashioned. We're going to pull out our bitters here. I'm using 2 different types of bitters for this one because I like it. So this is the Trinity bitters from Bitter Cube, and a part of that is a mixture of 3 different kinds of bitters: cherry bark vanilla, super tasty. There is an orange bitters in it, as well as Bolivar bitters, and Bolivar bitters are very similar to this classic right here, the Angostura bitters. Angostura is probably the most prolific, like well-known bitters that is out there. And then we have Larson for our bourbon. This one is a fairly like robust bourbon that has just really intense like notes, but it's really like soft on the mouthfeel. So it makes for a nice old fashioned that's just like really, really smooth. Some old fashions are a lot harsher hitting, and they can use a harsh whiskey and bring out some of the intense notes of it using bitters. And then you can kind of tame it down and make it more palatable with your simple syrup. So when you are building your cocktail in your mixing glass, you're going to want to start with your cheapest ingredients first. And the reason for that being, if you screw up and you need to start over, which bartending at home, I would never, right? But bartending for others or in a restaurant, things like that, if you mess up, you have to start over. You pour it out and you take the loss. If you start with your cheapest ingredients, then you are running much less of a risk, because if I use a really nice bourbon for an old fashioned and I immediately mess up on the next thing right after I poured the bourbon in there, well, I've just wasted 2 ounces of bourbon. So that's why you want to start with your cheap ones. We're going to start with our simple syrup, the cheapest one of all. And then you're going to want to measure out a 1/4 ounce of your simple syrup. Now, you can do this to taste, and if you don't have a jigger, that's okay too. But that being said, I believe a 1/2 tablespoon is the same as a 1/4 fluid ounce. And a jigger is a wonderful tool to have. It has lines in here that tell you what your measurement is, and it's a really useful tool to get used to using. So we're going to use a 1/4 ounce of the simple syrup. We're going to pour that right in here. Very cool. Let it run down a little bit. All those drops get out of there. And then we're going to add in our bitters. So I'm going to use the Trinity bitters as well as the Angostura bitters. You want to use 3 or 4 dashes. Really, once again, depends on your taste and what your preference is, as well as kind of what your other ingredients are. So the Trinity bitters, I'm going to take 2 dashes, 1, 2. When you throw those dashes of bitters in there, you really want to like actually jolt the whole bottle with it, rather than kind of doing like a little salt and pepper shaker action. It's just going to give you the most accurate dash of bitters, if you will. And then we'll take 2 dashes of the Angostura bitters in the glass as well. You may notice I have kind of a little bit of a station here. It really depends on what you are planning to do and what you have on hand. I myself, this is nothing like a bar that you would actually bartend in, like a real bar, but having a surface to work on, just a simple cutting board over a towel is really nice. You can get a bar mat for your home if you want to. It's kind of a rubber mat with these little rubber nubs that kind of set everything. You can set everything on, and the liquids will fall to the bottom of it so that you can keep your surface dry, which is pretty nice. So, you know, you want to set things out in a place that makes sense for you and is really going to have everything in reach so that you don't have to go running around everywhere to do each step. You want to be able to stand at your station and just make the thing. And if you're going to make more than one cocktail, it's worth setting something like this up because you're not going to take as much time on the cocktails when you're making more than one. So we have, it's called mise en place, is what that is. It's French for everything in its place, and you want to be able to essentially be able to do all of this blind if you had to, right? Granted, pouring into a jigger blind is a little bit of a trick I have done myself. So we're going to take our bourbon here, and to refresh your mind, we had a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup in the glass, as well as 4 dashes of bitters. I did 2 and 2 of the Trinity bitters from Bitter Cube and Angostura. And then we're going to take 2 ounces of this Larceny bourbon, and that will go in the glass as well. We'll pour that right there. When you're filling up your jigger, make sure that you fill it not just all the way to the top, but until there is a little bubble over the top. We call that a meniscus, just like with a graduated cylinder, if you paid attention in chemistry class. And that is when your jigger is actually full. It's when it is all the way up. Give that jigger a little rinse, and I will run away briefly to go get some. So we have our ice in our mixing glass here. When you don't have the ice moving in the mixing glass, it really isn't diluting very quickly. So you can actually leave this like this for a little bit. You don't want to go walk away from this for 20 minutes. You'll definitely water it down. But at the same time, this is really not diluting very quickly right now. So if you had to do something else while this is cooking here, you can. Now, we have another tool here, a bar spoon. Bar spoons are designed a very particular way with the spiral here that you can see. It has a number of functionalities, primarily being that it makes it really easy to keep in your fingers as you mix. So what you're going to do when you take the bar spoon is you're going to take your pointer finger, your index finger, and you're going to pinch it. You're going to take one more finger, middle finger, on one side, and then these 2 fingers are going to go on the other side. And as you turn the glass, or turn the spoon in the glass, you pull it towards yourself on one side with these 2 fingers, and then you push it away from yourself on the other side with these 2 fingers down here. And you actually are going to want to let it turn in your hand. And you can see how the spoon is always facing the center. I'm not like keeping the spoon static. It's always facing the center. You're going to want to stir this about 50 times. There we are. Now, normally I would do this part with a straw to taste this, but this is all me, and I'm not serving this to anyone but myself, so I'm just going to taste it right here. You can check and see if the dilution is what you want. The beautiful thing about an old fashioned is it's going to go on ice anyways, so if it's a little strong, you actually don't want to dilute this one quite as much as other cocktails. I might have even overdone it slightly. But either way, it's about where I want it, and I don't want it to dilute any further. So I'm going to go get my big ice cube. having a good paring knife in your kitchen is definitely a necessity for a lot of things, and one of those would be shaving ice sometimes, just to make sure that it fits in your glass. So like I said before, when I was talking about the dilution of your cocktail, an old fashioned is meant to kind of, at least with bourbon, dilute further in the glass. There are some spirits that like water with them, and others that don't. You probably have heard, whiskey and water. Just a couple drops will usually open up a whiskey a little bit more. And so putting a bourbon old fashioned or whiskey old fashioned over ice is really good. So I have my old fashioned glass. Fits a 2-inch cube beautifully. Sometimes you gotta give it a little spin and get everything to melt down so that it fits just right in here. There we go. Put it at the bottom of the glass. Take your strainer here, another handy bar tool. You actually buy this at Kitchen Window. It comes with this thing, which is pretty nice. We'll go ahead and pour that over the ice here. There are multiple schools of thought regarding pouring over ice. Generally, you're not supposed to, but I don't have ice tongs here, so work with what you got. And then you're going to want to take a potato peeler. In this case, a Y peeler is really good for peeling fruit skins, and an orange or a lemon, something like that. In this case, a clementine, and you're going to peel back some of the skin here. Oh, this clementine is really, really ripe, so it's a little bit tough to get the skin off without pulling some of the fruit with it. And then you're going to do something that we call espresso. And this is a powerful little thing here. So there's all sorts of essential oils in this little fruit skin right here. And if you face the skin of the fruit towards the glass and just give it a pinch, it's going to expel all of those essential oils all over the drink. And you'll start to feel that the fruit skin will become kind of wet, and that's the oil on the surface of it. I can just like smell clementines everywhere going on right here. The best is when you can get up really close to one with like a light behind it and just see all this crazy mist fly around. You can really just rub this thing everywhere. You really want it to taste nice and orangey on the nose, to the taste. This will affect the taste of the cocktail too. If I was a bar full of people, I would be doing this so that they'd all be smelling that orange and they would all want an old fashioned. And then I'm going to take a little touch here that I really like, and this is from Cocktail Codex, how they make their old fashioned, which very good book about cocktails and very good drinks. And I'm going to do the same thing here, but I am just going to express it. I'm not going to rub it around. The lemon oils are a lot more intense than the oils from the orange, so you don't necessarily need that as much, right? It's just a lot. And now we're going to get to the classic garnish. That's what we're working on here with our old fashioned. You want to do the cherries, you can grab yourself a little skewer, something to fish your cherries out with, tweezers, or in my case, chopsticks. And I like the cherries, and I've got them, so I might as well do it right, especially if it's a drink for me. So we'll fish those bad boys out of the jar here, a couple of cherries. And here is where some of the finesse comes in the presentation. We've got our skewer here, and we want this orange in here. I'm just going to wrap this around right here and toss that in here. And you'll see it's quite pretty. There you go. That is an old fashioned. And the most important thing when you make yourself a wonderful, tasty cocktail is to have some. And as it turns out, it's really, really good. Who would have thought? Awesome, awesome. I'm just gonna check in with the gang. Are there any questions? I don't see anything in the chat, or maybe I do. Don't want to lock it over here. Let's see. Okay. Nothing from anybody in the chat. That's okay. Cool. Well, this is a cocktail. I'm probably not going to drink all of it myself. I have a roommate upstairs who I know would greatly appreciate this, so I might hand this off to him in a couple of minutes. But meanwhile, I will, enjoy the creation that I have just created. So a mixing glass is what we use for our first cocktail, and a mixing glass is really good for anything that you can call a stable cocktail or something just with spirits, right? And the reason for that is you don't need anything else, right? All you need to do is dilute it, and when you move the ice around, you dilute it faster, and this is just a really, really nice way to get a really controlled dilution, right? If I had tasted the first time, I was like, oh, it's so close, it just needs like 5 more. I can do 1 more spin or 5 more spins, it really doesn't matter. And the nice thing is you can just like really finely tune this right here. Now, you want to make sure that you give all of your tools that you're going to use for your next thing a little rinse or a complete wash, and then we will move on to the next cocktail. Now, the next thing I'm going to make is fun. It is a little bit more involved with the ingredients. Old Fashions are really nice because they're simple. You only really need 2 things that you probably don't already have: the spirit and the bitters. And depending on who you are, you probably have the spirit. Most people have sugar laying around in their house, and honestly, you don't really even need ice to be able to make it. The ice is just nice because it cools everything down and keeps things diluting further. But our next cocktail that we're going to do involves some citrus, and I will explain all of the bottles here now. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get some citrus working. So we need fresh lemon juice for this cocktail. So I'm going to make that happen here. You can go ahead and roll your lemon just to kind of loose things up a little bit. Give that a nice cut open here. And then I have a mesh strainer on hand right here. And I'm going to squeeze the lemon juice through the mesh strainer. And the reason for that is I just don't want all of the extra pulp in the cocktail. And all I'm doing right here is just squeezing that juice through the strainer. I'll probably get as much as I need out of it, just the 1, and we'll be good there. And we're pretty close to juiced on that one. There we go. Got all our juice. And then I'm going to take a look and make sure that I actually have enough. Yes, I do. All right, so this cocktail that I am making is called Ship's Lefty. It is a play on, the name is a play on one of the ingredients. The left side of the ship is port, and in this cocktail we have port. So really not as creative as you would think, but you know, I am full of the dad jokes and I love my puns, so you know, why don't we do it? With that being said, you are going to need fresh lemon juice. Lemon juice is seriously always better fresh. Don't worry, don't bother with the store-bought stuff in a bottle. It does not taste the same. Fresh lemon juice should be fresh too. Like, honestly, it has a very different taste by the very next day. Yeah, that is a good question. So this one will make things a little easier for you to see. I have two different jiggers here. So there are multiple lines inside. In here, this right here is a 1/4 ounce, and then there is a 1/3 of an ounce. This line is 3/4. The top is 1.5 ounces. So the lines inside, once you get to the line, that's it. The wash line on the top, if it's just flat here on the top, it's not a full 1.5 ounces. You need to have the bubble over it, which can be hard to show a camera without it being super close. And then on this side, that bevel there is a 1/4 ounce, and then there is a 1/2 ounce line and a full ounce over here. And then the other one has similar lines, but it's kind of structured a little differently. And there's a lot of different versions of the same tool that are kind of cool. And so as time goes on, you get to learn kind of what you prefer and such. So with that being said, our ingredients list for Ship's Lefty, you need some fresh lemon juice. So you'll want to get probably some lemons, who would have thought. And then you'll need simple syrup, a port or sweet red wine of some kind, and then a London dry gin. There are a lot of different types of gin out there, and a London dry is a particular type. It is a particular process that they use, particular ingredients for making the gin. So it is something that is actually quite specific. There are other types of gin out there. You know, there's Plymouth gin, things like that are just different ways of making it. So not all gin is the same, and gin is one of those ones that I think gets a really bad rap from people. There are people out there who just go, oh God, I hate gin, and I myself don't take shots of gin. I don't drink it on its own for pleasure, because that's not me, and I think most people think that's how you do it. And then I give them a cocktail with gin in it, and that blows their mind, and then all of a sudden they understand. So lemon dry gin is really nice because it is drying and it just hits the botanical flavors really, really well. I think a lot of cocktails that use a vodka out there are better off just using gin, because gin can function as sort of a botanical backbone, if you will. It just brings a layer out of your cocktail that normally wouldn't be there, kind of the same way that bitters do, right? It just gives a spice to your cocktail, not like spicy hot, but just it gives it that note. It hits a certain kind of way when you add that in there. So then next ingredient that we use for this one is Chambord, which is a raspberry liqueur. So if you have another raspberry liqueur out there, I'm sure that would work just fine for you as well. Now, with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. So you want to use a shaker tin for this cocktail. Now, why would I want to do that? That's the question, right? We used a mixing glass for the old fashioned, so why the extra tools? Well, citrus juice is something that in a cocktail, most of the time, you're going to want to shake. And the reason for that is you're pushing air into the cocktail when you do that, right? Think of whisking eggs into a meringue. It's kind of the same exact thing, actually. You can actually turn egg whites into a meringue in one of these. It's how you make whiskey sour. So the citrus juice just likes to have that air in it. It gives it a better mouthfeel. It brings out different flavors in it. Mouthfeel is a huge thing. Just the feeling of a cocktail in your mouth can be very distinctive. You can have something that runs very thin, or something that's very thick and fatty and seems to just spread itself out all over your entire palate. So it is a thing that you have to consider when you're trying to make a good cocktail. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and start our build here. So I already have my lemon juice in my jigger here, so I will go ahead and put that in here. You can build it in the smaller tin of the two. Very nice, very nice. And that's 3/4 of an ounce, 0.75 ounces of fresh lemon juice is going to go into this cocktail. And then you can go ahead and pull out your simple syrup. This one is only a 1/4 ounce, same as the old fashioned actually. Now, normally when you're dealing with a citrus drink, things like that, you're going to be looking at perhaps a bit more of your fat, your simple syrup, whatever it may be. But in this case, I don't need to because I am using a liqueur. And so liqueurs are liquor with sugar. And in this case, this is a raspberry liqueur. And I'm going to use a 1/2 ounce of the raspberry liqueur. This one has a pour spout on it. Super handy tool to have. Makes making a lot of drinks really, really easy because you don't need to put the cap back on. You can just pour with this, and it makes life simple, makes it easy to pour accurately because it slows down the pour. You don't have to worry about tilting the bottle. It just has like a consistent speed that it pours out. You can just tip the bottle upside down and measure it out. And if you're making a bunch of cocktails with the same bottles, you don't want to have to take a cap off and put it back on every minute. It's not great. So we have in glass, we have our 3/4 of lemon juice. We've got a 1/4 ounce of the simple syrup and a 1/2 ounce of the raspberry liqueur. These two together are going to do the job of making this drink a little sweet. Although I don't know if it is a particularly sweet cocktail. It's fruity, but not too crazy sweet by any means. And then we'll take our port here, an ounce. And you don't need an expensive port to make this cocktail by any means. I honestly just get the cheapest one that I can. And we've got our ounce here. And then you will also take an ounce of gin and throw it in the cocktail as well. We have our full ounce there. Now, the glassware that I like to use for this one is called a Nick and Nora. It's Nick and Nora. It's this right here. You've probably seen it before. It just looks like a nice little kind of goblet, like a little dainty goblet of sorts. Has that very distinctive shape to it that makes it really recognizable, but a lot of people don't realize that it has a name. Nick and Nora, as I understand, were like a fictional couple on a show in like the 50s or 60s, and they were notoriously alcoholic. And this cocktail glass somehow got that name. I really don't know how. And this is stemware, right? That's like a whole field of glassware. Another really popular one is, of course, a coupe. This is what champagne used to be served in kind of before flutes became a thing. And this is a flute, of course. You'll probably recognize this one of the three, but a coupe is also a particularly special one. And then you have your Nick and Nora. Now, the way that you're going to serve between these three is kind of up to you. The whole thing, though, is that a wash line is important, right? You can look at this glass, and even though I've already taken a couple of sips out of it, it still looks full, right? And when you give someone a cocktail, you want it to look full because then they feel like they're getting their money's worth. And sometimes the choice is really just the glassware more than how much booze you're actually pouring. You can have the same cocktail go into this glass, or the same cocktail go into this glass versus this glass, and your wash line might come up all the way to here on this one, while it only comes up to here on this one. And even though that person is getting the exact same thing, the psychology of it says, I'm not getting a whole drink. So glassware is important for that reason, but it's also important depending on if you want to have ice in your cocktail once you serve it, right? A cocktail without ice in it, once it's served, is called a stable cocktail. It's called a stable cocktail because it is not going to change its composition in the glass. Every second that this is in here, the composition of the liquid here is changing. It's becoming more watered, right? But a cocktail in stemware typically doesn't have any ice to it, typically, and therefore it's not going to change at all. Oh, that's it. So I have my cocktail built in the tin here. So now I'm going to go and fill this guy up with ice. Fill your stuff up all the way, folks. Just do it. The reason for that is consistency, right? You always want to be consistent with what you're making. There's the age-old argument. Do you chill your mixing glass before you make your cocktail? Not, right? You want your cocktail to be cold, don't you? And the answer is either is fine. You can chill it or you cannot chill it. But if you're going to make 10 old fashions for 10 different people throughout the night, or 10 old fashions for 6 different people throughout the night, you need to do the same thing with all of them. Because a chilled mixing glass won't dilute as quickly as a non-chilled one, right? So you need to make that choice. It just needs to be consistent. And that's why you fill everything up all the way, because you're going to be able to get the most consistent results that way. So we've got our ice in our big one, got our mix in our little one. Let's see if you can see that. Not really, of course not. So we'll pour that in here. And then you're going to seal it. And there is a trick to this, right? You can check and see if this is a straight line right here. Should be a jagged edge over here and a nice straight line right here. Cool. Make sure that it's sealed in there really nice and tight. You're going to take your thumb and put it right here. 2 fingers on one, 2 fingers on the other. It's almost kind of like you're holding a little football. You can also hold it this way if you want, but you're going to want to shake horizontally, and you're never going to want to shake towards a person, right? Always shake, if this was a bar, right, and you were sitting over here, you want to shake up and down the bar in case the off chance that there's a little bit of a mishap, something explodes maybe, you're not getting your guests wet, right? So we'll go ahead and shake this for about 10 to 12 seconds. All right. Now when it comes to getting this apart, we have a few different angles, right? We'll call right up here at the top, this right here, we'll call 6 o'clock, right? So this is 12 o'clock. I'm looking at it right here. You've got your clock essentially, and you need to go from having the seal right here, and you need to drag it 90 degrees to the side, either 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It's hard to necessarily show you what I'm doing, but when you're right here, you just want to push it off to the side, and it'll come right on out. If you try and like wrench on it a bunch, it's hard to do. And there's just a particular way that tool, much like all the other tools, likes to be used. So now we'll go ahead and pour this out. When it comes to a shaken cocktail, you want to pour through a mesh strainer as well, just to filter out any of these small chunks of ice, little chips of ice and things like that. There we are. Now, for me, I love the presentation of cocktails in Nick and Nora, and how you garnish a cocktail is something worth seriously thinking about, right? Because right here, this orange is exposed, sitting in here. So every time I take a sip of this, it smells like oranges. And your sense affects how you taste things. So you want to really consider that, right? You can have cocktails that are just meant to smell. You can have cocktails that, you know, contrast the color of the thing and just really draws your eye to it. You can have edible garnishes. All of those are good options for you. So for this one, I love the presentation of a plain Nick and Nora just on its own a lot of the time, and that's good enough for me. So I'm going to take my half of a lemon here. I should have peeled this before if I was smart, but today I am not. And I'm just going to get a little peel of lemon here, and I am going to express that lemon peel over the cocktail so that it smells like lemon. But then I'm going to get rid of this. I'm just going to discard it because I don't want it. And now you have the chips Lefty. Nice and simple, gin, raspberry, little sweetbread wine, lemon. Super tasty. Honestly, really well balanced too. You can like really get the raspberry out of it. The wine hits first, but you can still get the boozy notes out of it with the gin. So it kind of has those botanical herby notes. It has that dark grape with like plum and all those sweet stone fruits and berries with raspberry. And there's lemon in there, so it just all kind of is bright with dark notes and botanical notes and everything. And all in all, a super tasty cocktail. Would recommend, and I will go